to confirm their attendance, please. Chris Burke.
Here.
Peter Crosby.
Here.
Andrew Hornsby. Andrew Hornsby.
No.
No. Thank you very much. Have I missed anyone out?
Yes, Jill Chandonnet, who's sent her apologies. She's an officer.
Oh, yes, of course. Apologies.
I'll send those to you, actually, Rob, anyway.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I think we've gone through everyone now, Chair, if you'd like to commence the meeting.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that work. Welcome, everybody. And could we begin by asking Lindsay Norris to do a reflection for us? Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you. So the vision for education for church schools is based around John 10:10, and we obviously do a lot of work around that. And it says, "I have come that they may have life and have life to the full." Now, a while back, I wrote a reflection for schools based on that, and I have adapted that for today. So I'm just going to read some of it to you. I'm not sure it's always felt like we've been living life to the full this year. For some, being at home more, having the children around more, having just that bit more time has been a joy. But for many, it has been a struggle. Not being able to go out as much, see friends and family, and generally having life disrupted has proved to be a real challenge. As we reflect on the last 16 months, can we say we've been able to live our lives to the full? We've been living with the idea of uncertainty, constant change, and a new normal for so long, meaning living life to the full can seem difficult. But there are ways we can start to live life to the full, even under our current circumstances. Well-being and mental health are much talked about topics, thankfully. While people are still working on putting them on a par with physical health, thanks to celebrities and royalty and much of the work of the NHS and social services and many prominent people in this area, it's certainly talked about and started to be understood better than ever before. And if we are to live our life to the full, as the Vision for Education suggests, then our physical, spiritual, emotional and mental well-being must all play a part. There are so many ways to start focusing on these areas of our life, and we could spend hours looking at different areas. But today, I just want to suggest one: rest. Relaxation and rest is key in supporting our own well-being and mental health. Inspirational speaker Mark Black states, "Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is relax." It's so easy within hectic lifestyles, work pressure and deadlines to forget to relax, particularly in education at this time of year. Yet just 5 minutes periodically stepping away can give us greater energy levels to tackle whatever lies before us, help us manage stress and live life to the full. So I just have 2 questions. Do you feel like you are living life to the full? And if not, or even if you are, how can you build rest and relaxation into your day to help live our lives to the full? Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was gorgeous. You reminded me of an old saying of my mother, which is wrong on many levels, but she used to say, "God bless the man who invented bed." Usually on her way there with a whiskey, I have to add. But thanks, Lindsay, that was wonderful. And I feel like initiating a discussion to answer your question, but perhaps later. Right. So moving on to our agenda, we've had some apologies. Tanweer, were you in our roll call? I can't remember. Just checking.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And welcome. Do I have any other apologies for absence other than the ones we've received, colleagues? No? Any declarations of members' interest? I think that's primarily councillors. I have none. Right. And have you all had a copy of the minutes of the last meeting? I ought to say it's not there, but is there any matters arising for the minutes that aren't covered by the agenda?
Chair, can I say this is my last meeting. I'm stepping down from the meeting. I think with my workload, I like to nominate my colleague, Imam Atiq, who is hosting hundreds of visits from school, who is more appropriate to represent the Islamic Association, if that's okay.
We've made a note of that, Tanwir, and can I thank you for your contribution? Always appreciated on all of the different forums that we meet you, but I'll miss you from this one, but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to correspondence received by the chair, if any. Chairman hasn't received any correspondence. And then item 6, your pages 11 to 12, Ofsted research review of RE by Jill. If I could.
Are you doing the minutes later, Chris?
Do you want me to do anything with the minutes, Wendy? I just did cover them.
Or just to agree them?
Yeah. Are we all agreed the minutes are correct?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all it. Yeah.
Moving to item 6, Ofsted research review of RE from Jill, please.
I need to be able to share my screen for this one, Robert, and I don't seem to have the capacity to do so. I did email in advance to check whether that would be possible.
All right, it should be. Is the button not there?
Good point.
I think I need to be recorded as a presenter, possibly.
All right. Have you got the spreadsheet? If you email it to me, is that possible?
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that very quickly now. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, that's surprising. I thought you'd be able to do it now after it's had Teams have had an update recently, I think.
Bear with me, I shall just find it for you. Do you want to move on, Chair, and come back to me in a second?
Yeah. Item 9, if you're ready, Wendy, to receive an update on Hinduism in schools, please.
Hang on a sec. I'm just faffing about because, if you pardon the technological term, because I realise that for my item 8, I'll need to share mine as well. I was just trying to. Sorry to mess around here. Rob, will you need me to email it to you?
Well, I was just going to say, Jill, could you just have a look again? Because you should be a presenter now.
Yes, you have done it. Well done. Thank you very much.
So you'll be able to do that for me then, will you, Rob?
Of course, yeah. All the credit goes to Rachel on Friday. Sorry, I thought it. Everyone.
We could go back then as we were, Chris, now.
Right, okay, so item 6
were,
then.
everybody.
As you were.
Over to Gillian, thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is just to update you with a research review that was published by Ofsted at the end of May this year. To give a little bit of context about this, there are a whole range of curriculum research reviews being published at the moment by Ofsted. Obviously, they are bearing in mind the fact that lots of schools have had a very interrupted curriculum over the last 18 months, and they are seeking to establish, if you like, a view on what a good quality education might look like across the different curriculum subjects. So this is the one for RE. It was led by Dr. Richard Quay, who is the Ofsted lead for religious education. And this research review has been published now in order to, if you like, articulate what Ofsted feel a good quality of education might look like in RE. And what will happen next is that Ofsted inspectors will actually go into schools and carry out a review of teaching practice across all the different subjects, including RE. And it's anticipated that they will publish an overview of what they have actually found through those visits in early 2022. So really, this is significant for schools in our region because it sets out the stall, if you like, for what Ofsted inspectors will be looking for when they are seeking to judge the quality of education in our schools. And that is regardless of whether the subjects have what's called a deep dive, so a real intense scrutiny, or not. It is setting out the baseline standards of what a good quality education looks like across the broad and balanced curriculum. It's not a checklist. It's not saying every school must deliver RE like this, but it is articulating what one might find in a school that is delivering good quality RE.
Somebody's talking. Somebody's talking. We've got some sound coming in from somewhere.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, so probably the most important thing for schools, and I won't go through this in any great detail for us, it's not totally relevant to our work, but for schools, probably the most significant thing that this review talks about are the different types of knowledge that might be developed through the teaching of RE. And I think most schools will have a confident handle on what is called here the substantive knowledge, or the content that is actually taught. What is a little newer for many schools around the country is what Ofsted articulates as disciplinary knowledge, which are the different ways of knowing in RE. So to give you an example, if we were talking about science, you might teach water in lots of different lessons in the science curriculum, but you might look at water through the lens of biology, through the lens of chemistry, or through the lens of physics. And in each case, you would be asking slightly different sorts of questions and developing slightly different sorts of skills. So in the Ofsted review, it is articulating that RE should look similar to that the content that is taught should be looked at through different lenses to help the children develop the sort of specialist knowledge and specialist skills associated with studying religious and non-religious worldviews. It mentions as an example in that review theology, philosophy, and the human social sciences, so sociology, history, geography, psychology, and so on. Our syllabus is very well set up to support that model, and lots of our schools across Lincolnshire already utilise that model. So I am confident in saying that our schools have a bit of a head start compared to what it might look like for other schools across England. So the summary of the review is this. The teaching of RE should be grounded in academic study, so not just making design your own Islamic prayer mat or create a little diva lamp out of clay. You know, this has to be real rigorous academic study. The content that you cover should be covered collectively enough. Now, this is significant to us as we think about how we shape an agreed syllabus. Because what this is essentially saying is that agreed syllabus writers need to make decisions about what will be taught and why, because you cannot cover everything. So there need to be some really careful choices made that can be justified for the context in which that syllabus is being written. What Ofsted do not want to see is as many religions and non-religious worldviews as you can get with a tiny little bit of information about each of them. So a very superficial sprint through the big six and a couple of extras. They don't want that. The curriculum needs to be well sequenced. For us, the implication of that is we need to think really carefully about what goes on the syllabus so that schools can teach the same things from foundation stage right the way up to Key Stage 4 in a spiral curriculum, so that pupils are getting lots of opportunities to revisit and deepen their knowledge over time. Teachers and leaders need to acknowledge that sometimes in the RE curriculum you are teaching quite sensitive and controversial topics, so they need to be thinking carefully about how and when to actually put those into the curriculum. Pupils should be developing that disciplinary knowledge, so those ways of knowing, the lenses that I was talking about earlier. Assessment, hooray, should not be excessively onerous, and I say this with great joy in my heart as a secondary teacher who used to have to write reports every 6 weeks for 500 students, having seen them for 2 lessons. I mean, that's a ridiculous situation. So this is quite clear that pupils need time to make progress, and you don't see pupils very often for RE lessons. Therefore, the assessment should be aligned with what is actually taught and how frequently teachers see the pupil. Crucially, and this doesn't happen as much in this region compared to other regions nearby, but it is very firm in the responsibilities of senior leaders. And it is very clear that those responsibilities are the same in academies as they are in maintained local authority schools. Sufficient curriculum time must be allocated for RE. For us in particular, the implication there is more about secondary RE, where RE is perhaps squished in with other curriculum subjects like PSHE, RSE, citizenship. Ofsted quite clearly state that that is an indicator of a weak RE curriculum. So that is something that we might need to think about communicating to our secondary schools and academies. It also talks quite clearly about those who are involved in actually delivering the RE curriculum, whether that is teachers, teaching assistants in primary school, and ideally it does state that secondary schools should have RE specialist teachers, at least one. So what are the implications for us? Well, we can think very carefully now on the back of this review as to what the training and support that is offered, that Wendy offers through S.A.C.R.E, how that can be aligned to these expectations. We have an opportunity, and I know certainly North Lincolnshire and North East Lincolnshire S.A.C.R.Es have contacted heads, executive heads, chairs of governors to remind them of the statutory duties in relation to RE. So we have an opportunity to do so in Lincolnshire and align it with this review. It would also be helpful for us to proactively seek information about the current context. So I know that we have talked about a survey to see what's happening in various schools. We've recently carried that out in North and North East Lincolnshire as well. And that particular process led to us realising that not many secondary schools and academies in those regions were compliant with statutory duties. So it would be helpful to be proactively seeking that information in this region too. It's also worth thinking carefully about how our members could make themselves available to schools who want to include a variety of lived experiences in the classroom. So one of the key things about this disciplinary knowledge approach, if we are looking through the lens of social science, if we are thinking about lived religion, we need to help children understand that not all Christians do it in the same way. And not all Muslims do it in the same way, that there is the formal official version, if you like, of a religion, and then there is the way in which individuals actually live it, which might look slightly different from person to person. So schools do not currently have an awful lot of resources to support them to help children understand that. We are a living resource in that regard. So if S.A.C.R.E members were willing to actually think about how they could support schools in that way, whether it's visits or creating recordings that could be shared with schools and so on. And then I think it also has relevance, and I know Wendy will mention this later on, because we are getting terribly close to when we have to start thinking about the review of our current agreed syllabus. And this is a very useful document to help shape our thinking about that. Right, that's all I have to say. If anyone has any questions, please do ask.
Jill,
do, Chair,
oh, I'm so sorry. Can I do you mind if I just add something? Otherwise I'll forget. Jill, just say at the end of all that was really so helpful. That one thing that both Jill and I noticed when we had read through the document, and this was quite heartwarming really, that for the past 18 months our schools have received training and documentation from both of us that have included substantive and disciplinary knowledge. And we've been going on about that for almost 2 years. So we've been ahead of the game there. And in many ways, the dog started barking now. In many ways, that's reflected in our syllabus as well. So I think it's really good that we can, we should pat ourselves on the back a bit, because we have been ahead of it with our teachers. So that it's not, what I'm really saying is it's not new to them. These terms will not be new to our teachers. They will know. And at the moment, and the most recent documentation sent out to them was on assessment, so which certainly follows the lines of what that paper's saying. So it's a great thing when you read a paper from Ofsted and you think, we're doing that. Oh, that's a good idea. And that doesn't happen that often, does it, Jill? So that's good. And just secondly, to say that a survey at the direction of Jill Chand and I has been sent to schools, Jill, to ask about what's going on, and I'll pull that together and talk to you about that in the autumn. So sorry, Councillor, I just wanted to say those things before I forgot them. So
okay,
thanks
Jackie.
for that, Jill.
Councillor Brockman.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. That was a brilliant presentation, Gillian. Thank you. That was very, very helpful. I do have some concerns. I mean, this is music to my ears. I think they do need to go in depth. This business of skating through is very disadvantage to the children of homes where the parents haven't got the opportunity to take them out there, to give them experiences beyond the school curriculum. So this is much, much better. However, I do have concerns about the way it's going to be taught. In music, if I just give an example, we used to have to teach music from a variety of cultures, and they would allocate something like 2 to 3 weeks to Indian classical music. Now, if anybody knows anything about the complexity of Indian classical music, that is completely ignorance beyond belief and is really offensive. You cannot do Indian classical music. You need sort of 5 years just to begin your study on it. And I think that there is a danger, this business of doing Hinduism, doing Islam and all
Absolutely.
the rest of it. They touch them and move on. But the biggest worry I have is something I've experienced in my own children myself, is people who work very hard to learn, very good RE teachers, but they don't live it in the way Gillian has just described. So you've got some RE teachers teaching Islam who have never set foot inside a mosque. And I do feel that perhaps they need to spend some time to get some insight into the different communities. How can you teach Hinduism if you really don't know any Hindus and have been there and have been to their services? Because the differences in understanding and use of words can be very, very subtle. But if you haven't experienced it, you can miss it totally. And I don't know how we get past that. They do need to live it to teach it. Thank you ever so much, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, might I respond?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Sorry. I think actually this is where the pandemic has been incredibly helpful to us, because one of the things it has done is opened up the use of technologies like this to enable pupils who live in relatively monocultural regions to access that lived reality, not simply across the nation, but globally as well. I think our syllabus and the resources we've produced to support schools consistently offer guidance and advice, links to key texts, to video clips, to podcasts and so on. A perfect example of this will be on the BBC World Service last week, was a podcast called Finding My Hinduism, which looked at a whole range of different ways of living as a Hindu in England in particular. So I think schools are getting that support through Wendy and I, and through the materials that are already shared via the website that the agreed syllabus is hosted on. I think we are working quite committedly and quite strategically to thinking about how we can help pupils who cannot personally access some of these experiences due to geography, economics and so on, to have some sort of experience of the diversity, and we'll continue to let S.A.C.R.E members know what impact that's having.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Yes, thank you, Chris. And can I say thank you for a very enlightening and interesting presentation. I found that absolutely absorbing. Not being negative, Chris, but 2 or 3 things occurred to me which may be covered but not included in the presentation. And from a schooling point of view, First question is there a minimum teaching time for religious education within this framework? And secondly, if schools don't do it, what are the possible penalties or sanctions? I mean, I've seen well in the past where, if you like, lip service is given to religious education, apart from faith schools, etc. So just two questions. Chris, be interested if there are any replies to those, please.
Thank you for that. Gillian?
Yeah, I'm happy to reply. In terms of the curriculum provision, the document that we refer to in our agreed syllabus is the Deering Review, which was written in 1994 or 1995, which specifies that 5% of the curriculum should be given to RE, and that equates to roughly around an hour a week from Key Stage 1 and above. So that is a good measure of what RE should look like. If it was significantly below that, and Ofsted or any of the other accountable bodies were to find out, they would be asking questions about how pupils could appropriately build their schema of knowledge in RE if they are only getting 1 hour every 8 weeks, for example. In terms of accountability, this is an interesting one. For local authority maintained schools, it is Ofsted, and historically Ofsted have not picked up on non-compliance, but Dr. Richard Quay is a force to be reckoned with. And what I have noticed is that since he came into post, where schools are not complying with their statutory duties for RE, it is being picked up and it is being noted in Ofsted reports as something that schools have to address. For academies, the duty sits on the school's funding agreement. So if the school is failing to include RE as part of the curriculum, the body that is technically responsible for that is the ESFA, the funding body. In reality, what happens is the ESFA are informed that the school is non-compliant and they will send Ofsted in to check, essentially. The issue with academies is that obviously you have your flexibility of how you shape your curriculum, and all the funding agreements tend to say is that RE should be part of the curriculum. It doesn't specify time allowance on the funding agreement. So there is mileage there for some senior leaders to argue that the way in which they deliver RE, as for example in some secondary academies I'm working with further north than Lincolnshire, as part of a life curriculum, which is a sort of a mishmash of all the little subjects that nobody wants to teach on an hour a fortnight. And you know, it is possible to hold academies to account for failing to comply. Certainly the National Association of Teachers of RE have supported several teachers and parents to do so. There have been multiple questions asked in Parliament that have clarified that it is a statutory duty for all schools and academies to include RE. But what is less clear is what that RE should look like, particularly in terms of time allowance. So there is a bit of a grey area there, I will admit.
Thank you, Gillian. I've got several people asking questions. I've got Jennifer and then I've got Tanweer. Jennifer?
Hi, thank you. I read this review obviously as it came out, and I have to say, as a head of department in Lincolnshire in a secondary school, I felt quite smug that I was very aware of all of these things. And I have to give credit to Wendy and Gillian because they have really supported me as a head of department in being familiar with these terms and rewriting the curriculum in response to them. So I'd just like to publicly thank them both for that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer. Tanweer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Just to add, I think learning by visiting and meeting relevant religion is quite important, because visiting places of worship, for example, coming to Mass, you really learn very much and understand. And second point, I think is helpful, important, then when the syllabus is designed, getting input from relevant religion expert is quite important, because I found sometimes the teaching is not right. And so I think, for example, I mean, we're more than happy if the school like to come and contact us and they can contact me, either myself or our imam or school. We have website with general inquiry email address, and our imam, both imam, deal with those rapidly. We will be happy to help in terms of making sure syllabus and teaching and the contents are appropriate.
Thank you, Tanveer.
Can I just say, Chair, that obviously when Wendy and I and the teaching group who put together our current syllabus and the supporting materials, we do always consult with members of faith groups before we share anything with schools. So we're confident that what we are sharing with schools is appropriate, but we're also mindful that there are different, for example, Muslim communities or different Christian communities who might understand things in different ways. So what a Quaker might understand as the most important belief in Christianity might look different from what a Catholic Christian might understand as, so we do try to actually run it by a variety of different groups within that particular religious worldview, rather than just going to a single person or a single community, just to make sure we are trying to help our schools understand the breadth of that lived diversity as well.
Thank you for that, Gillian.
Can I add?
Yes,
just I'm happy. I think what you're saying, but getting to expert those who are recognized organization is quite helpful, certainly, because I agree there are different people have different views, but if you contact someone who may not have in-depth knowledge, understanding, she may give information which may not be right. So I think it's no doubt there are different view, different opinion, but contacting recognized organization or expert in the field is quite important and helpful.
Thanks very much for that, Tanveer. And I think that's a key point. Yes, talking to organisations, and the other key point for me was that we can hold academies to account, Gillian. That's I think that's something we haven't all, certainly I haven't always fully understood. I've had a few difficulties sometimes making contact on a community basis with academies, so I'm grateful to that. Gillian, any more points you want to make? Are you okay with that?
I think just to clarify that as a local authority body, we have no rights to directly intervene in academy that we suspect is non-compliant, but we can convince people through unrelenting kindness and reminding them of their statutory duties and how we can help them. Yeah.
What a splendid approach. Thank you, Gillian. That's lovely. Can I ask you to move on to item 7, diocesan update, please?
Yes, of course. To be honest, let me just stop presenting this. Sorry. Not a huge amount to say because things continue to be mostly virtual. We continue to deliver training and support virtually. I'm sure Wendy will agree with me on this. I am 100 million times more productive than I was pre-COVID because I am no longer having to drive around the county, so I can fit at least 6 more meetings into my day with all of its associated paperwork and report writing. So actually, I feel as though our ability to support schools has actually improved. One possible benefit of the last 18 months. So continuing to do all that support around effective RE, supporting subject leaders, and I now also support Church of England and Methodist schools to prepare for their church schools inspection, which has a slightly different role to the RE side of my job. But apart from that, things continue as they ever do.
Thank you, Gillian, and thank you for what you do. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 8, S.A.C.R.E National S.A.C.R.E report into local authority funding. This is you, Wendy, isn't it?
It is. So I've got the money bit. For those of you who don't know, S.A.C.R.E is the National Association for S.A.C.R.Es, and the background to this is a few months ago, S.A.C.R.E put out a freedom of information request to all local authorities to ask them how they were funding their S.A.C.R.Es, and they got obviously responses back. So what I want to do in the next few minutes is talk to you about those responses and how S.A.C.R.E analysed them, and think about what it might mean for us. This actually is incredibly timely, and it fits in seamlessly with what Jill's been talking about, because a lot of what she was saying about things like high quality RE, CPD, resources and so on, these things just cannot happen if RE isn't funded properly. So they do tie together in a really important way, and these things just don't happen by magic. So if I just go, I'll just try and get my now share content. Rob, am I going to be able to share my content?
Yeah, you should be able to
share content. Presenter mode. Is that it? Wait a minute. Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh.
No, nothing's happened at all. Oh, now it's disappeared completely. I haven't even got a share thing. Let me see what happens.
Someone is presenting. I think you are presenting, I think.
Am I? Let me see if right, can you see it? Can you see anything?
Yeah, I can see the presentation.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah,
it's happened by magic. by a mystery. Okay. So I've got this compelling title to present to you then of S.A.C.R.E funding in England. And actually, as you know, it is incredibly important for us as an authority. So the background is that the level of funding for local authorities, not just S.A.C.R.Es, but local authorities, has been a source of concern for some time, because they've been reduced significantly. And that has led to many underfunding their S.A.C.R.Es. And I have to say, looking at the analysis, in some cases, S.A.C.R.Es have been the first ones, if you like, the easy target, the ones that they will cut without even consultation. Now, in going back to 2017, a survey found that as a result then of underfunding, even then, many S.A.C.R.Es were unable to carry out their statutory duties. So Nick Gibb then said that they should be funding S.A.C.R.Es from the Central Services Schools block. I didn't know what that was either, but I'm sure some of you will know, from 18 to 19 onwards. And he said at the time, local authorities are expected to ensure that S.A.C.R.Es are funded adequately to perform their duties. And S.A.C.R.Es continue to play an important role in supporting schools to teach high quality RE. So he supported better funding and recommended that LAs allow around 2% of this funding. We'll catch up with this in a bit in relation to Lincolnshire. Now, the difficulty here is, although the Department of Education might support the advice from S.A.C.R.E and other bodies, in the end, it is up to local authorities to determine their own budgets and where funding comes from. So there's two things going on here. On the one hand, the government's saying, yes, RE is very important and it should be properly funded. But on the other hand, it's also saying, yes, but as a local authority, you can do what you like with your money, more or less. So this freedom of information was requested in 2020. Lincolnshire was one of the local authorities who responded to the request, and S.A.C.R.E have said they're likely to repeat this request on a regular basis. So that should be interesting. Now, the work of S.A.C.R.E is an overview of the findings. This was quite good to read, that despite widespread inadequate funding, many S.A.C.R.Es have continued to meet and offer support to schools, and many, including Lincolnshire, have just continued. So things have carried on despite the lack of money. And I suppose some S.A.C.R.Es will say, well, it's been cheaper to do it via Teams or Zoom or whatever. But the report does show, to put it bluntly, that many S.A.C.R.Es do deserve better support from their local authorities, as you'll see in a moment. But as a S.A.C.R.E, we do have a right to raise questions about the level of support, even if we think we've been supported well, and to receive the funding that's needed to underpin our work, particularly, I'm thinking, in relation to what Jill's been saying about Ofsted. So the main headlines of the report, as we said, that it's looking dire for some S.A.C.R.Es, I have to say. The majority of S.A.C.R.Es don't get a sufficient share of the CSSB. They just don't get the recommendation. Only 12 local authorities in 2019 to 20 said they had used 2% or more of the funds on S.A.C.R.E business. And 25, remember this is from a sample that was given to S.A.C.R.E, not every local authority in the country. 25 local authorities claimed to use no funding for S.A.C.R.E business, so they gave no money at all. It's surprising, isn't it, that they responded to the Freedom of Information request, really, to state that, but they are contravening statutory responsibilities if they're in that situation. And a quarter said they allocated no funds for professional support, so they allowed the meetings to go on, but there wasn't a Gillian or a Wendy at those meetings. More than half said they didn't use any funds to support RE in schools. So RE in schools where we do extra things like we provide resources and so on to support work in schools, or we do school visits, that kind of thing. So inevitably, the analysis found that due to inadequate support, some S.A.C.R.Es can't fulfil their duties. Some local authorities reported that their agreed syllabus was over 6 years old. One was last reviewed in 2010. So some of the detail, it was 110 local authorities responded to the request. Now this is quite interesting. 82% spent on average 11,000. So the remaining local authorities with no funding. Isn't it interesting? The largest spend was as high as 93, but it's interesting that the most significant levels were not necessarily linked to the greatest number of schools. So there's a complete variance and inconsistency with the way that the money's been allocated. It just seems to be whether a local authority values the work or values RE rather than the size of the authority. Now, 23 of those local authorities provide funding outside of the CSSB. Now, Lincolnshire is one of them, but Chris and I so far haven't been able to find exactly where our funding comes from. Now, because we haven't got the information about the CSSB, we don't know whether we're higher or lower than the recommendation of 2%. So we have nothing to compare that with. The range of funding allocated to professional support, such as advisory services, look at the range there, range from almost 60,000 in one authority to £145. I don't know which authority that was. And funding to democratic services for clerking and helping run S.A.C.R.Es ranged again from £25,000 to £200. And again, funding allocating to supporting RE in schools in the sort of things I mentioned earlier range from 10,000 to 112. I mean, you'll need time to look at this and take all this in. I know that, but this is just giving you the headlines. Now, for us, funding hasn't been cut. Not really. It's remained approximately the same since around 2008, which is when Councillor Talbot, insisted that funding was provided on a more permanent basis. But at that time, and that was around the time I came along, there were actually two advisors. There was a man whose first name was Rodney, whose second name I've now forgotten, me and Paulette Bissell. So that, in fact, it was higher then. And that the other advisor left, I think, about a year after I was in post. So it has gone down slightly. So the present funding for my time and clerking is 30,000, and that hasn't changed. Some support has disappeared. In the early days, I received admin support and she arranged school visits, sent out notes of visit, all that kind of thing. That's completely disappeared. Now, this links with what Jill was saying. Our agreed syllabus runs from 2018 to 23, and that means it needs to be reviewed in 2023. Now, realistically, this means we need to start the process around the same time, this time next year. So we don't envisage major changes, but there will be some amendments, such as bringing us up to date with Ofsted and so forth, and this will need to be costed. So we need to think, where does that leave us, really? We're not in a bad place in Lincolnshire. I've been given no information about next year's budget, but we're not in a place as bad. We're not as bad as some people, and we are given a regular budget. We haven't been cut drastically. However, we need to offer advice to the local authority about the level of funding requires. And so we need to talk more about this, I think, in the autumn, because we do need to make a decision. Is it sufficient to have the same funding that we were having in 2008? I'm paid on the same daily rate that I was then. And this is the equivalent of 5 days each month, which is not a lot really to carry out a lot of the work that I would like to do, but there we are. But then again, what should we realistically expect when local authorities are having cuts to their funding, right, left and centre? And that's an important consideration. And what kind of support do we want to be able to offer schools in terms of RE and collective worship, such as carefully planned school visits. At the moment, they tend to be a bit reactive. Schools ask for help and I go. 10 years ago, I was planning visits every term with a focused agenda. It'd be good to bring those back again. The agreed syllabus planning, resources, CPD and so on. All these things, the time and money has to come from somewhere. And as I said, the present situation is the equivalent of 5 days a month of my time. So that's where we are. If I can just come out of that. I've whistled through that a bit because a lot of it is quite tedious figures that you need to look at when you've got a moment, but I think you'll get the gist of it. And that is, to summarise, there's a mixed picture nationally. We're not by any means the worst funded, but we're not the best either. But where does it leave us, and what is it we'll want to be saying to the local authority for next year? Because as Chris knows, in the autumn, the budget will be talked about and decided probably. So I'll take any questions or comments from you, Chris, if you want to ask anything.
Thanks, Wendy. I have Councillor Jackie Brockway, please.
Yes, sorry, I keep asking questions.
No, that's okay.
This is going to sound a bit controversial. It's not meant to be hostile at all. But I think we need to be careful here. The funding is very, very tight indeed. And S.A.C.R.E is essentially an extra layer. Other subjects don't have anything like a S.A.C.R.E. So the first question to ask is, why do we need a S.A.C.R.E? Why does RE need this extra layer? Other subjects, they don't have all these subject officers, all these people. They agree the curriculum on the basis of the national curriculum. RE teachers could do the same. The county could get together. So I think there needs to be a strong argument about why we need a S.A.C.R.E. I know it's statutory, so we've got to have it, which is great. But I think we've got to be careful about not putting ourselves in a position where somebody says, well, why do we need us in the first place? Because I think that question could be asked. While you've been talking, I've just sent an email to Janice Spencer to ask what our 2% should be.
Yes, so that's a good. Yeah, that was good.
I get an answer. If anything pops up, I'll let you know. But
great.
I think it is very important that we know what this funding is, where it's coming from, how secure is it. For instance, LALC, the Association for Local Councils, they get £5,000 a year from the County Council, and that £5,000 is very, very important to their functioning, and they do a good job, which is kind of an extra layer again, but it is essential. So I think we need to be able to say why we are essential before somebody comes along and says, do we need this body at all? Because other bodies have been cut when they didn't expect to be.
Yeah.
Just throwing all that in there.
No, I totally take the point, and that's where I said I was very guarded about. I realise that cuts have been made right, left, and centre, and I wouldn't want us to appear to be greedy. There is a statutory issue of S.A.C.R.E and the point that because it's a locally agreed syllabus, we have support that's different to, say, subjects that are part of the national curriculum. But yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think a balance has to be made between the fact that we have been well funded over the last few years. All I'm saying is, are we saying, is that sufficient for us to do our work or not, is really the question I'm putting to you. And I think if Ofsted are going to churn out reports like this that say we've got to do A, B, C and D, they've got to try and explain, where that sort of funding comes from.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Wendy. I think it's a good question. We need to be ready to answer it in the way that Wendy has, and also in other ways, in terms of we do make a national contribution as well. So what Lincolnshire is doing in terms of RE is presented to national S.A.C.R.E, and that's two-way, isn't it, Wendy? That we when we go there, as we physically will go there next year, we bring stuff back as well, don't we?
That's right, absolutely. Yeah, but I think Councillor Brockwade's made some good points there that we need to think about.
Anybody else want to make any points? I'm just checking for hands. I'm not seeing anything.
I think Wendy is still sharing her screen because I'm getting double.
Well, I've no control
on my laptop.
Stop sharing.
Double pictures of me.
That's it. You've done it. Yeah.
Wow, marvellous.
Thank you.
There you go.
Right. I have no hands up, Wendy. So
well, I think probably, Chris, people need to look more carefully at the figures, so we can come back to it next term and talk about it a bit more.
Would it be useful? I think it would be useful if you sent your slides around as well. I think they're some good summaries.
I think Rob will send those out. If I'm going to email Rob tomorrow with one or two things, so he can send both sets out actually. If Jill's happy with that, the Ofsted one and the funding one.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Yeah,
that would be
good. No problem.
Yeah, thank you. The next item on our agenda today, excuse me, is Hinduism in schools, and this is from you, Wendy, an update on Hinduism in schools.
I just wanted to mention this because this was something that was circulated a while ago. It's actually called Hinduism in Religious Education in UK Schools. It was a report that came out, published by someone called Insight UK. And I did read the report. I mean, in a nutshell, it's expressing some disquiet with the way that Hinduism is taught in schools, and much reflected, I think, by some of the things Jill was saying about what Ofsted is saying about good and not so good RE teaching. So it's worth a read from that point of view. But also I wanted to mention it because Hinduism is part of our agreed syllabus. And I know that Gillian and I do keep an eye on how different religions are delivered in schools. I don't want to say too much about the report, except that I personally, and it would have to be my personal view, I don't know, Jill, if you've had time to read this, but my own personal view was some of the evidence base was a little bit weak, that some of the evidence for suggesting, for example, that resources used by schools are not very good was they only give us a very tiny sample, and it's not possible for us to look into it in too much detail. So I think it's a useful report, and it reminds us that we have to think about how complex religion is. You know, Tanwi was talking earlier about the importance of visits, for example. I mean, in Leicester, we have lots and lots of different Hindu mandir, but people don't always realise that if you go to one, say the Swaminarayan temple on Gypsy Lane, there is a different take on the faith, which incidentally shouldn't really even be called Hinduism, to if they go to Sri Sanatan Mandir, which is in a different place. You know, they reflect completely different aspects of a religion, which is important, but actually quite sophisticated. And I think the report's saying teachers aren't able to do this. They're not doing it very well. But this takes us back full circle to the need for CPD, doesn't it? And non-specialist teachers being expected to deliver what is actually a quite complex religion. So the report's worth reading, but just be careful a little bit with the evidence base, because I think it could be a little bit more solid. For example, they use a lot of evidence based on hearsay of parents, which doesn't seem to be based on anything very concrete. But I'm sure they have a point that in many schools it's not being delivered particularly effectively. So that's that one, unless anyone has anything to say about that.
I'm not seeing any hands up, Wendy. I think we're all just being attentive to what you're saying.
Well, the other two are very brief as well. The update on school is very much the same as Jill's. That I've been continuing to do visits virtually and by visiting schools, but I have noticed recently a request to go into schools. So I am looking forward to doing that, and I think that will be more so in the autumn term. So we'll see how things pan out then, really. I guess it'll be a question of us using our professional judgment, really. If somebody asks to see you and it can be done online, I guess we would perhaps opt to do that. But if it wasn't possible and it was better by Teams, we would do that. I think we'll just make our judgments there.
Yeah.
So my final bit was just to say that this year nobody was able to go to the conference. I did read the update. If you want to read the summary of the S.A.C.R.E conference, it is on their website. The theme was authority in RE, and the speakers included Professor Denise Cush, who's had quite a long association with Lincolnshire actually, and has spoken at many of our conferences, if you remember. And I think Richard Quay was also a speaker as well. So it's a shame that none of us could go, but there's a very, very good summary on the S.A.C.R.E website. That's all from me, Chris.
Thanks for that, Wendy. That's been quite a lot of hugely useful information. I mean, to be fair to you, we did all intend to go to that S.A.C.R.E National Conference.
Yes, it was a bit
we were diverted. I mean, to be honest,
yes.
A lot of us, including Wendy and I know Gillian, were actually fairly swamped with other work. And I know that councillors here will bear me out that a lot of extra work for local government officers and councillors occurred, and teachers and heads. So I'm not surprised we missed it. But well, I'm very determined that we will physically get to the next one. And Wendy's very usefully reminding us of that. Any questions of those three reports? Is everybody okay? If so, then I wonder if I could have a volunteer to give us another reflection at our next meeting, which I think is in September. Would somebody like to? If we all step back, whoever's still there. Anybody feel moved? I'll let one of them uncomfortable pauses develop while you think. While you think about it. Well, if
sorry, Chair, can I just check the date of the September meeting?
I haven't got it to hand actually, but we'll get admin to send it out.
Because in theory, if I can make it, I would. I feel like my turn has come round again. I think it's been a little while since I last did one. If you're happy for me to do one, but I don't currently have the date in my diary, which might suggest it clashes with something I'm already doing.
Yeah. Chris, I don't know why we're saying September actually, because I've got November the 23rd.
Right, I'll go with
else
that.
Got that. No, but is that just me? Is that right?
23rd of what? September?
November.
Oh.
Yeah, Wendy, I've got that as well. 23rd of November.
Yeah.
There we go.
Just put it down to my growing senility.
I haven't got that.
Yeah.
We'll send it out.
Let's say November 23rd then, Gillian, and thank you for volunteering to do a reflection then. That's very good of you. Okay, and then that just leaves us date and time of the next meeting, which we just did happily, because otherwise I'd have been turning up in September. And we also, I mean, our plan would be, if everybody's happy with this, and it looks like the way the country is going is, it looks as if that'll be a real meeting, a three-dimensional meeting in a room. So that gives us two subjects. One, we'll keep that under review, of course, and make a decision, say, in the next few weeks, because there's government advice coming out all the time now, but it looks as if that's likely to be physical. So the next question is where you would like it. Now, we had started to move around. I mean, Tanway made us very welcome. We were made very welcome at Bardney Primary School. I know it all seems a terribly long time ago. But I did kind of like that. So perhaps we could all reflect on where we might want to meet. We don't have to meet somewhere else. We've always been welcome to County Hall. But I just feel it's good for us actually to be in different parts of Lincolnshire, particularly those of us based in Lincoln can become too Lincoln-centric, and we can forget what the towns of Lincolnshire, which is the majority of the rest of Lincolnshire. So if I could ask people to think about it.
Chris,
Yes.
I'm sure that William Farr would be happy to host you. We have a
That
training
sounds
room
like-
here.
Yeah.
So I can just speak to the business manager and check that we can book that. Obviously, it'd be dependent on COVID restrictions and things, but I'm sure we'd be happy to host.
That sounds really good. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to come in, Chair, just to say if we did return to county offices, I know we've just talked about another venue. What we were discussing earlier at our pre-meet, we would be able to facilitate remote attendees as well as face-to-face attendees, just if anyone did have such concerns that they wasn't entirely comfortable about returning to a physical space. But that's entirely up to yourselves. I just wanted to make sure the attendees today were aware of that.
Thanks for that, Robert. That's very useful to know. And I'm sure that we'll return to County Hall at some stage, perhaps the next meeting, but we've got an offer from William Farr, which I'm very grateful for. I wonder whether even meeting at William Farr, whether there might be a remote option. I just saw a message from Sean on that. I know that it's a much smaller meeting, but one of the church groups that I'm involved in, the Catinians, we are planning to combine. So we're going to have one of these, which this one happens to be provided by the City Council. Can you see that? No, maybe not. Whether that works with the virtual thing. There we are. So that's just a basic iPad, but it can be used to capture and send out images at a meeting. So perhaps even at William Farr, we might manage a remote link. We'll have to think about it.
Yeah, we've got in the training room, there's a large screen and we could hook that up and set up a Teams for people that couldn't make it in person. So that would be possible.
Is that, who's that? Sorry, I couldn't.
It's Jenny, sorry,
Oh,
from
thanks.
William Farr. Yeah.
Jennifer King. Jenny, thank you. Yeah, that's good. So
Yeah.
we can do that with you. That's lovely.
Yeah, we could do remote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, could we make a decision now, colleagues? Are you all happy to go to William Farr?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. There we are.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Chairman,
Thank you, Jenny.
I must admit,
Jackie.
yeah, I come from a different perspective here. I really think we need to justify asking people to travel and do physical meetings. We know that the winter there's likely to be an upsurge. Yes, we're vaccinated, but not everybody is vaccinated. But also, we now know that there's a different way of working with, which you're going to have to, I think, justify asking people to use the extra time to travel when they could be doing other work, and also not only that, the damage to the environment for travelling if we don't need to. I think there's a different thinking coming in, and I'm not sure, is this a public facing meeting where we have to meet publicly? In which case, are we for instance, is this a meeting that members of the public would come into or have access to? In which case, I'm not sure about the moving around. I think it's great to move around, all things being equal. I think if William Farr has offered and we're going to have a public facing meeting, we should go to William Farr. It's a nice offer and it would be very rude to refuse. However, I think there is a decision to think about. Do we need face-to-face meetings at all? Why do we need a face-to-face meeting? What benefit is it, apart from the fact that we can see each other and give each other a virtual hug sort of thing? You know what I mean? It's
Or a real hug.
a real hug, yeah, a real hug. But I can tell you, I'm not going to be going to a meeting again and sitting next to somebody who's got a cold. I mean, the thinking is changing, and I think we need to continue the thinking and not just rush back and say, oh, we're free now, we can all go and sit together in a small room now. Actually, no. So just being an awkward so-and-so as per usual. But I think we have got to do this different thinking now. Do we need to be physical at all? If so, why? Justify it. So I'm challenged to you there, Chris.
Thank
But
you.
it's said in a friendly way.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I think they're very valid points, Jackie, really. And we need to think about it. I think but my approach would be to say, let's think about them points. Yes, let's go to William Farr as a decision in principle. But yes, let's keep this under review and let's listen to those points and think around them. There's certainly been a lot of gains to working remotely, and I wouldn't want to lose those gains in that sense. But at the same time, I think also there's a great deal of value in meeting. There's body language, there's catching people's eyes, there's a different interplay, which is also another argument. So I think there's kind of a debate there. So, I mean, my feeling is, yes, let's keep that in mind. I mean, actually, we need to keep this under review anyway, because things can change. Things may not, things may not go as well as we all hope they will. In which case, if there's the slightest danger, then we would remain remote is the answer. And I think, yeah, I mean, my view, but it's up to the meeting, but my view is we, under current circumstances, happy to go to William Farr in November, subject to any change between now and then. And also keep the idea in review for the future, that there's no reason why we can't do some future meetings virtually. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of our meeting, colleagues. And thank you very much for a full and fascinating meeting. And we'll meet again in November.
Okay, Chris, thank you.